All right. So, welcome to today's Sovereignty Twitter space. I'm very excited. My name is Judas. I'm going to be your host tonight. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. Justice is blind. We really love this platform. Twitter Spaces allows us to gain insight always on new and interesting use cases that Sovereign can create for people who want to utilize their Bitcoin. Today, we're featuring a bunch of guests who will discuss using Bitcoin as a hedge against oppression, inflation, and how Bitcoin can be a cool tool for, how Bitcoin can be a tool for marginalized communities worldwide. Now, to discuss this topic, today we are joined by Yago, our in-house guest, a Bitcoin OG and early contributor to the Sovryn protocol. He has been...
Evening.
Hey, Yago. So Yago has been in the crypto space since 2011 and founded a few Bitcoin companies, Epified, 7DAO, and something interesting, a part of his story, which he will share further with us today, that as a youth, he fled the apartheid of South Africa with his family, which is a strong part in what led him to believe that Bitcoin is a key tool for self-sovereignty and for marginalized people worldwide. Hey, there you go. Besides that, we have our new guests here today. Pleasure to have you all. King Bless, Isaiah Jackson, Greg Tanaka, and Lamar Wilson. King Bless and Isaiah both are the co-hosts of the Gentlemen of Crypto podcast. King Bless also the co-founder of KBRE Digital Assets Group and focused on providing blockchain education that increases Bitcoin's adoption. Isaiah is also, besides the Gentlemen podcast, is the author of Bitcoin Black America, a great book talking exactly about the topics that we're going to talk about today. Greg Tanaka is a councilman for Palo Alto, California, and a pro-Bitcoin candidate for the U.S. Congress, a tech entrepreneur and advocate for Bitcoin adoption for marginalized communities and the world at large. And last but not least, Lamar Wilson, who is the founder of SunJoint and a strong Bitcoin advocate who works on encouraging the adoption of Bitcoin within the Black community and society in general. Gentlemen, I'm out of air, so I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves and tell your story a bit further. Yago, let's start with you. When did you get interested in Bitcoin and what got you down into the rabbit hole?
Sure. I'll talk about that in a second. I don't see the other speakers. Is that just me or?
I see the Gentlemen's Club here. For some reason, I invited them to speak, but it seems like they're unable to join. I hope we'll sort it out in a second. But for now, I guess we'll start.
Got it. Okay. Well, given that we're talking about Bitcoin being blind to who you are and as a result being able to provide sovereignty and freedom to individuals anywhere, regardless of sex, race, creed, opinion, there's this great line which I really like about Bitcoin, which is that Bitcoin is made for enemies, right? It's the perfect money because everyone can use it. Maybe I'll give a little bit of background about sort of my cultural background. My family is of Jewish descent. Part of the family was East European and part of the family was German Jewish. The German Jews migrated to South Africa just before World War II broke out. And the East Europeans were primarily in Lithuania and Poland. And, the German forces conquered Lithuania and Poland. And my family were living in the Warsaw Ghetto. And just before it became a ghetto, they had managed to liquidate everything they owned and turned it into jewels and gold, which they then managed to smuggle with themselves. And different members of the family were able to use that to survive in different ways. Some of them kind of, if anyone's seen Glorious Bastards, part of my family ended up living under the floorboards of a farmer's house in a ditch, which was also effectively the sewage. One of my family managed to smuggle vodka into a concentration camp and bribe the guards to drink the vodka as a gift, and then when they were drunk, he managed to smash them. He beat them to death basically, and managed to free himself and 12 other people. And there were other stories like that. Unfortunately, most of the family got wiped out. In the meantime, the German part of the family was in South Africa, and they had been interned in concentration camps as well by the British. And they were interned in concentration camps because they were German. And part of them died in those concentration camps as well. So both parts of the family went through the full brunt of those experiences. And it changed, sometimes we say in Bitcoin, what radicalized you? Well, that's what radicalized them at the time. And as a result, when the apartheid government was introduced, my family became active in fighting the apartheid government and joined what eventually became the ANC, or what some of you may know as Nelson Mandela's party. And as a result, part of my family were later declared to be terrorists by the apartheid government and had to flee South Africa, and I ended up having to smuggle gold out of the country as a young child to get money to them. And so I grew up on the stories and the understanding of just how fragile our so-called civilized societies were. Germany was supposedly the most enlightened and most democratic country in Europe at the time. The British certainly thought they were. And that ultimately it was only those who had managed to maintain their financial sovereignty that managed to survive when the world turned upside down, as it frequently does. So what got me into Bitcoin is my understanding that either I or other people in the world are vulnerable at any time. And it's important that we have some way that we can protect the individual from the societies and governments that once every 2 or 3 generations lose their minds and cause untold suffering.
Great. Thank you very much. Now, on the meanwhile, Greg is here with us, and Bitcoinzay also joined us. So thank you very much for being here, guys. We're working on the Gentlemen's Club, and we'll have them with us as well soon. So perhaps, Greg, you could continue and tell us when and why did you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for hosting the space. And Yago, very inspirational story. So as was mentioned earlier, I serve on the Palo Alto City Council. So I just won my re-election about a year ago, so second term. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I do a lot of work in the DeFi space. And as was mentioned, I'm running for U.S. Congress, mainly because crypto is under attack by our leaders who are not enlightened. In Washington, D.C., they're looking to basically shut it down. And that's what they've been trying to do with the crypto infrastructure bill, the crypto provisions in the infrastructure bill last year. So it's really bad news. For those of you that don't know, there's a provision in the infrastructure bill which will make basically everyone, software developers, wallet providers, artists making NFTs, anyone doing anything related to crypto, a broker, where you suddenly become Goldman Sachs or Wells Fargo or Morgan Stanley, and you have this broker requirement. You have to disclose everything. You have to find out people's social security numbers, people's address and real name, and stuff that's pretty much impossible to do today. And it has the potential of being a really chilling effect on this industry. So that's one of the reasons why I'm running, is because I believe someone was calling me and it kicked me off. Okay. Anyways, so that's one of the reasons why I'm running, is because what we should be doing instead is actually embracing this. We should be. I think we should have a holiday on capital gains in terms of when you're going from, let's say, Bitcoin to Ether or whatever. There should be no capital gains. Maybe only during the off ramps and on ramps should there be some sort of capital gains. China banned Bitcoin mining. And that's one of the biggest gifts our country has gotten from China is the fact that they shut down because it doesn't align with their authoritarian beliefs. But Bitcoin really does align well with our democracy, the ideals of our country. And so anyways, that's why I'm running for Congress, is because enough of us need to win to push against the folks that want to shut down Bitcoin and crypto. So just a little bit back on my story, and I can't top Yago's story. Yago's story is just, it shows the absolute need for something like Bitcoin. But I'll talk a little bit about mine. So, I'm for my dad's side. From my dad's side, I'm Japanese American. From my mom's side, I'm Chinese American. And I realize some people here listening may not know, but during World War II, the Japanese Americans living on the western side of the United States, they all got put into concentration camps. Not quite as bad as the Jewish people in Germany in terms of there was no gas chambers, but pretty much, within a few days of an executive order, all Japanese Americans needed to get rounded up and put in concentration camps. And so it was my family at the time. So my great grandfather came from Hiroshima, Japan, in around 1880. And so I'm fourth generation, and then my great grandfather, my grandfather, my dad, who was only I think about four or five at the time, they all got put into this concentration camp. My dad's dad, my grandfather, never made it out of the camps, so he died of tuberculosis in the camps. My grandparents started a wholesale food business where they would buy veggies from the Japanese American farmers and then sell it to the grocery stores. But during this time, pretty much they got wiped out, right? So you couldn't pay your mortgage on your property, you couldn't run your business, you had nothing. All you could take was basically 2 suitcases, right? And so I really relate to Yago's story about having to smuggle gold or jewelry, right, to have a store of wealth, a store of value, right? Because it was tough, right? You had to liquidate everything if you could even liquidate. You pretty much lost everything, and so there are times when, and these were American citizens, right? So my grandfather, my dad, and of course myself, were all born here in this country, but at the time, just because of our ancestry, we were not considered Americans for whatever reason, right? We lost our rights, and during these crazy times, you would want something like Bitcoin. You want some sort of safe store of value. You could theoretically, I guess, use gold or jewelry, but it's tough, right? I mean, these places are not. There's not much security, right? You're just carrying it on yourself, and people get robbed and whatnot. So it's not good. So having a really good safe store of value, something that can be transferred over time and space is really important, especially during these kind of crazy times like during the Holocaust or during World War II here in the United States for Japanese Americans. It's super bad news. So I've always been a big fan of Bitcoin. I actually started way back when they had you guys may not know, but they used to give away Bitcoin. It was called a Bitcoin faucet. It just was just super early days. And so you could actually get free, like a little bit of free Bitcoin. It's kind of crazy thinking about it. I wish I held on, I certainly didn't, but I wish I did. But yeah, so I think I actually personally believe that just like there's a separation of church and state or religion and state in this country, United States, I actually think that we should have a separation of money and state. I think because Bitcoin is software, it allows money to be independent. It allows it to be sound, right? Because right now with the fiat system, as we've seen with the U.S. government over the past 2 years, they printed something like 40% of the dollars in circulation were printed in the past 2 years, right? So that's why we have, like, I'm in Silicon Valley here, and our gas is almost $6 a gallon. I mean, it's pretty crazy. I bought 2 small pizzas for my family. There's only 4 of us, right? My wife and 2 kids, and it almost cost us over. Actually, no, it cost us a little bit over $100 for 2 small pizzas, and we were still hungry, right? So this shows you a bit of what's going on in terms of inflation. Of course, it differs in depending on where you live, but there's a tendency for all governments to to debase the currency because it seems like free money. It seems like you can just print more money and suddenly everyone's happy, right? And maybe short term that's okay. And there's a lot of incentive short term for politicians to do this kind of stuff, to print money like crazy and to let the money printer go burr. But long term, it destroys people's confidence. It destroys productivity. So you look at Weimar Germany, right? It led to the rise of Hitler, of the Nazis in Germany, right? You look at Argentina. You look at all these places where they had crazy inflation, and it leads to really bad things, right? It leads to um, a lot of um, destruction of productivity, and so we got to think about what is the purpose of money, right? The purpose of money is really the allocation of resources in an economy. Wealth isn't money, right? And I think that gets confused a lot. Money is kind of like a database. It's simply a way to keep track of and to provide a signal to the players in an economy to maximize productivity, right? And the productivity of a country is the wealth of the country, right? And when I explain to my kids what is inflation, right? I said, imagine, our household, we had 2 bananas, right? One banana for each of you. And, imagine if there was $10 in our household. And if I just suddenly print more money and there's $20 in the household, we still only have 2 bananas, right? It doesn't matter if we had $100 or $1,000, we only have 2 bananas, right? And in order to increase the wealth of a country, you need to actually increase the productivity. The way you increase the productivity of the country is you actually need to allocate resources properly. And the way that happens is through money, right? Now, if you have something like Bitcoin, which is sound money, you get really clear price signals. You get people automatically, without anyone directing them, they will produce what's needed automatically and maximize productivity. If you start distorting the economy, if you start distorting money, and you have a debased currency, then what happens is the production gets all whacked out. And the thing that I despise most about inflation is that it's a hidden tax. It's a illegal tax in my mind. It is hurting the people that are the most vulnerable in our society. So my dad, when he got out of the concentration camps here in the United States, if you were Japanese American in California, it was super bad news because everyone knew someone that died in the Pacific. So Japanese, even though the Japanese here were very different than Japanese in Japan, they were still kind of viewed the same. And so my dad, when he got out, he he got bullied, he got beat up so badly once that he decided to drop out of high school. So he got deprived of his education. And so growing up, my dad didn't have a high school education. My mom eventually separated from my dad, so we were even more poor. And so I could tell you, growing up really, really poor. Now, Palo Alto is not a poor area, but I grew up in LA, was a pretty poor area. For the poor, for the people lower on the social economic ladder, most of your pay is in cash. Most of your wealth is in cash. And when the government is debasing the currency, what they're really doing is they're hurting the poor the most. It's one of the most regressive forms of taxation known to man. The rich people, right? The Elon Musk of the world, right? The Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, they don't keep their wealth in cash, right? It's in equity in their companies. A lot of them don't even get real salaries. They get like $1 a year in salary. Most of the compensation is actually in equity or assets. And so when the government lets a money printer go burr, basically what they're doing is they're having this illegal tax on the poor people in our country, right? The people who are on the lowest end of the social economic ladder. And that's simply not right. So I could go on and on, but I want to give other people a chance to talk, and I could talk more if there's any questions.
All right, thank you very much for this great introduction to the subject by Councilman Tanaka. So for some reason, Lamar keeps connecting and disconnecting. We hope we can connect with him later on. But we do have King Bless and Isaiah Jackson, the co-hosts of the Gentlemen of Crypto podcast. Guys, I'd love you to also to introduce yourselves.
Hey everybody, I'm King. As mentioned, want to have a Gentleman in the Crypto podcast. What's going on, Bitcoinzay? I'll let you go ahead and start off.
Hey everyone, my name is Isaiah Jackson. I'm one half of the Gentleman of Crypto as well. And, my entry to the Bitcoin space in 2013 was a little bit because of how poor I was as a teacher. But it ended up after a year or so being definitely about the principles of money as well as the tech behind it, the ability for ownership. And as a member of the Black community, there were a number of problems that we faced, and I believe that Bitcoin can solve a lot of them, and is solving them as we speak. And going all the way back to my family history, as others seeing the use case for it, a lot of my grandparents, they're actually a part of the Lumbee tribe and the Seminole tribe as well. And when you talk about natives and ownership, we all know the story there of how their value was taken forcefully by them. And also in the Black community, we've seen with Black Wall Streets, a lot of the businesses burned to the ground and a lot of that wealth extracted. And one thing I loved about Bitcoin was the rules cannot be changed. True ownership comes, well, you can actually control your Bitcoin private keys, but actually control your wealth and the value that it has. And true ownership to me cannot exist without Bitcoin. There is not one asset in the world that you as an individual actually own without government interference. And, one of the main reasons why I got into this space and why I continue to go hard in this space is the fact that you have to stay vigilant, as Greg stated, when you're discussing the separation of money and the state. And I think that long term, we will start to see a lot of other people think and see the same thing about Bitcoin. And my main premise for the book Bitcoin in Black America and for the teachings that I do, which can be for any community, is that if you actually want to see how an economy works under a good money system, we have to separate from the current one. And you have to be vigilant about it. You have to understand that the current system does nothing but take your wealth slowly. And it does so that you don't really notice it until generations later you can see that wealth taken. So that's my backstory and my introduction to Bitcoin and why I think justice is impossible without a good money system like Bitcoin.
And picking up 2014, I'm going on my first deployment. I grew up a technologist, had a computer, back in 97, went to a charter school that gave everyone a free computer in the inner city of Detroit. I was lucky enough to win the lottery, go to that school, get a free computer. So I've always been, online, interested in technology, gamer, all that good stuff. So when I'm going on my first deployment in 2014, I have this list of things I want to learn about. And Bitcoin, dark web, deep web, these are like all the things when I had on my hit list. I was like, well, I got time to finally research all this stuff. But when I started looking into it, before I even understood what it was just like criminals, it's like bad things could happen, drugs and stuff. And I'm on the government computer, and I'm like, all right, whatever, like pause this. I guess I just won't have a chance to learn about it. And I was deployed on and off between 2014, 2015, and 2016. But at the beginning of 2016, Isaiah put out a Facebook post where it's just like, I'm done telling people about Bitcoin. Like, no one listens to me, like, whatever. And I immediately, we went to college together. So we've been friends since college. He was actually one of the first few people I met when I went to college. So literally since teenagers. But so I reached out to him, I'm just like, wait, like, about Bitcoin's going on? He's like, yeah, I've been into it, blah, blah, blah. And he tells me about it. He tells me to read a white paper. As soon as I do, I'm instantly hooked because I see just the freedom of it. Like, I just see the autonomy. I'm always in search of autonomy. And I saw the autonomy that Bitcoin granted. Like, you literally become your own bank. At the time, I was looking at things to do after the military. I was like, maybe I'll go to Wall Street or get an MBA and do things in the financial area just from some of the connections I made. But when I saw Bitcoin, it's like, wait, you don't need to go back to school. You don't need a license for this, or you don't need to go through regulations for this. You can literally just become your own bank right now, start buying Bitcoin, and start operating within the industry, whether you're providing services, getting paid in it, or as Bitcoinzay and I eventually started doing as well, literally, you can go to so many random places in Los Angeles and they have a Bitcoin ATM, or if they have anything Bitcoin related there, there's a strong possibility Isaiah has his stamp in that store. So just like literally getting in touch with the community and seeing the impact of how it changed business owners, how it changes people who have lower financial incomes. And as the good future congressman said, I'm happy to hear how he and his experience has helped him shape and view Bitcoin to see it not just for the monetary value, as a lot of people see it. They just want to, come into space and try to make money, but to see the actual value it has from a technical perspective of allowing citizens to become freer. And I'm in agreement with him that I think there should be a separation of money and state for sure. So thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. I couldn't agree with you more, and I think this is such an important subject. I think a few years ago when I tried to explain Bitcoin to my friends, and I tried to depict them an imaginary world where they can't keep their savings safe and where they can't do what they want with their money. It was very hard to explain this to a privileged white friend of mine from the country that I live in. But today, a few years after, and 2 years into COVID and all of the coercion that we see worldwide, and the Green Pass, and talking about further restricting people who are unvaccinated and closing bank accounts and stuff like that, it's actually becoming a reality, and people start to understand that what you guys are saying, that money and state, they should be separated. And this is why I think it's such an important subject today, and so many people are getting into it today. So I'm glad to have you with us to discuss this.
Right. Well, can I piggyback on one thing also I want to add? Throughout that, the years in the military, from traveling, literally being in different countries on a day-to-day basis at times, having to deal with the traditional banking system was a literal pain, and it made things difficult to the point where you could be stuck in a country and literally don't have access to your debit or credit cards as they've been locked. You don't speak the language, and you don't have, again, the money to actually use the ATM or pay for a phone call or any of these things. I've been in these experiences, and they're super scary. So again, when I look back at things like Bitcoin, it's just like we just surpassed this entire system, and it's just like one less step that we need to do to have our own value, our own. And the last but not least, when I came home, I knew it was real because Bank of America literally had me come to the office and sat me down like a school child asking, why was I buying Bitcoin? Like, what was I doing and stuff? And it's literally, I just got off the deployment. And I was like, I can't believe I'm being questioned by a private citizen about what I'm doing with my money. And that's when I knew it was like, just this is real at this moment.
Every word. I couldn't agree more. Now, all of these feelings, they have some backup in statistics, because according to an article from CoinDesk from late August, Black and LGBTQ Americans are more than twice as likely to invest in crypto than white Americans. This policy found that 43% of Black Americans believe they have not been treated fairly by the banking and loans industries, and this sentiment as well is echoed by 39% of the LGBTQ communities. So basically everything you're saying is also depicted in the numbers, and you also touched it with the Cantillon effect that explains all of it, which is the uneven expansion of the amount of money. The closer you are to the sources of the creation of money, you get it for a cheaper price, and the time that it takes it to go down to the lower to the bottom of society, we can call it, to the lower I forgot the word, sorry. It becomes worthless, 50% less, 50% or even less than what it was worth when the Rothschilds and the bankers and the people who took the loans to buy assets took and raised all of the asset prices and inflation with it. So I want you to speak a bit more than me, but it's just a very important subject to me. So Isaiah, King, how do you guys see Bitcoin adoption helping communities of color, particularly in the United States, and what do you guys focus on to make that happen?
Well, to quote someone, I would say that first, Bitcoin is not necessarily just for get rich quick scheme. It's a don't get poor slowly scheme. And the main thing about Bitcoin's adoption amongst the Black community for right now, I believe it's because people think they can get rich quick in fiat terms. But that entryway is just a step towards what they can really realize is that your money is being debased at a level where you're losing 1% of your wealth every 30 days. And that is not sustainable long term. And if you look at statistically the income levels, the Black community is at the bottom. And if you want a good money system, Bitcoin has outperformed every money system that's ever been created. And to me, there is no other way that you can actually achieve in this world long term if you don't have a good money system, or the value always rises to the top. The Cantillon effect is a part of that. People closest to the money have most of the access and the ability to invest earlier than anybody else. But Bitcoin has flipped that on its head, right? We now have the ability to invest in an asset or to own an asset that is not owned by 98% of the world. So I think that one way that it solves it is it gives you the ability to be a free human being. And in the Black community, that is the only thing that I've been looking for years, is equal opportunity. Not equal outcome, but equal opportunity. And once that is achieved, left to our own devices, I think the Black community will do just fine. And I think Bitcoin gives us that that entryway into that type of role.
Yeah. In addition to that, also when it comes to, again, just from community building, and then on even a broader scale now that, Kirby Digital Assets Group with Isaiah's down with Mayor Suarez in Miami representing Miami Coin, the lead on that project. As I've already mentioned, some of the community building we've done here, whether it's getting Bitcoin ATMs into places or at least having owners start to accept Bitcoin. I just had a coffee shop last week accept Bitcoin finally. So doing those community building things, the education component of Bitcoin, I think is the most important, because like Isaiah said, a lot of people are getting in thinking it's a get rich quick scheme, and then once they're in it, they kind of learn more after that. But adding to those educational components, shameless plug, but true, everyone even came to us we get the same questions almost on a daily basis. So we finally created a masterclass, as we've seen others have, but they're more focused on best altcoin to get and make your profits improve. We're like, hey, slow down, just focus on the technology, focus on the Bitcoin pay server, focus on some of the applications that can be built on Bitcoin rather than just different tokens. So I think the education component of the space is really important.
Let me just jump in with one perspective as well, which I was talking to the county assessor for Alameda County, which is East Bay here in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And he was telling me about how a lot of the folks on a lower socioeconomic ladder were getting preyed upon by these payday loan providers. And for the guys listening, you guys may not know much about payday loans, but they charge 500% interest a year. 500%. I mean, it's just crazy high interest for people to get their money just like a week or 2 weeks ahead of time. And because the interest rates are so high, they're never able to get out of it, right? And these are folks that tend to be unbanked. They may not be documented. They may not be the most educated. And I think the potential that Bitcoin offers, and you look at something like the Lightning Network, where it's super easy to use. There's a fallacy out there that Bitcoin or crypto is hard to use or is confusing, but people actually have to try to use Lightning, right? And if you look at El Salvador and how they adopted Bitcoin, it is something which all people can use. And I think the beauty of it is that instead of these crazy payday loan that people have to take, they could go on to crypto and become the part of the banking system, right? Not the traditional banking system, but the crypto banking system. And that's incredibly empowering, because a lot of us probably don't realize how what life would be if you couldn't access your ATM, right? If your credit card doesn't work. And so my tech startup, we had an office in Shenzhen, another in Hyderabad. I used to go to Asia quite a bit, China and Japan and South Korea and whatnot. And I had the same experience. For sometimes, for whatever reason, my Visa doesn't work, right? And what do you do, right? And it's sometimes you couldn't get money out of the ATM for whatever reason, because of some sort of glitch. And yeah, I mean, I think having Bitcoin as a way to store your wealth and be able to transfer value is super important, especially in this global world, and especially if you're unbanked, especially if you're poor, especially if you're not good at the language, especially if you're not documented, right? I think the potential of Bitcoin is a great equalizer, because it's totally race blind, right? It doesn't care what race you are. It doesn't care where you are on the socioeconomic ladder. And so it gives fair opportunity to everyone, versus the traditional banking system. If you walk in, you're not dressed the right way for the banker. If you don't talk the right way, if you don't look the right way, right, you get discriminated against, right? And I could definitely tell you, like at least here in California, there were lots of laws where if you were a minority, even here in Palo Alto, there were laws where if you were, the wrong race, you couldn't buy a house or you had to buy things at unfavorable terms, and that's simply not right. And I think what I love about Bitcoin is that software. Software doesn't discriminate against people. People do, but software doesn't, and I think that's the beauty. And so that's why I'm a huge supporter of Bitcoin.
I agree. And we're going to get to this back in a second. For some reason, Lamar keeps disconnecting. We hope we can get to him later. For those of you guys who will raise your hands to ask your questions, we're going to keep this discussion a bit. And in about, I think, 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to open it up for questions. So I'm writing down everyone who has to speak by the order. So just keep the requests there, and as soon as we do that, I'm going to raise you to speak by the order of your requests. All right. Yago, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, so I think there's two approaches to how you empower people. One approach is that the way we empower people is we need to have large organizations. Typically, this is the government, but it wasn't always the government, and it isn't always the government. It could be charities, it could be the church, it could be all kinds of things. Today, it typically ends up being the government, but you have to have some big daddy and big mommy that is going to be the great equalizer between people. And this leads to a culture of dependence. The empowerment of people isn't coming from the people themselves. It's coming from some kind of external source. And it, as a result, increases a sense of dependency, reduces a sense of people's own agency, and I think as a result, tends to achieve the exact opposite of what people are at least saying they're trying to accomplish, right? It empowers those who claim the mantle of assisting, the so-called oppressed, instead of actually helping the people it's meant to help. The other version is that you empower people to take control of their own lives. And this is, I think, fundamentally what Bitcoin is about. So for me, Bitcoin is more than just sound money. I view Bitcoin as a part of a broader approach to life, how we ourselves can live our lives and empower ourselves, and to society, how we can build a society of people who are able to take control over their lives, and as a result be masters of themselves, masters of their destiny, and also as a result have a sense of mastery, a sense of control. And I think that it's exactly that sense which allows people to have the hustle, the motivation, the belief that they can change their circumstances. So what Bitcoin does is it basically treats everyone the same. There is no social institution that has ever been created which treats people with the degree of equality that Bitcoin treats people. And this is because Bitcoin is the first institution which is not managed by people, but is managed by the blind lottery of finding blocks, which is a really, really remarkable idea. And it's also the first type of technology which creates a type of property, right? A type of ownership, which instead of being based on geography or class or in particular violence, is based on, again, cryptography, which is equally available to the most powerful nation state as it is to the poorest person. So it represents a philosophical approach to what it is to empower people. An approach which says the way we're going to empower people is by truly treating them in exactly the same way, right? Instead of don't be evil, can't be evil. Instead of rulers, rules without rulers. And it also gives them that actual power. It hands it to them in the most fundamental way, which is in terms of their being able to take ownership. And ownership really, is the core to your sense of control, right? That's what ownership means. It's control. And so when you have ownership of the most fundamental measure of value, which is money, then you can effectively achieve ownership of all aspects. So I don't know that there's ever been a technology which has provided such a radically different approach to how we can both create equality within our societies, empower people, and connect people, because Bitcoin also connects everyone in the world to a common market, a common standard, and a common set of rules. And following up on some of the other things that I said in my introduction, one of the lessons that we learned from the Holocaust, from World War II, or that we say that we've learned is never again, right? And yet the structures that we have in place in terms of our institutions have not changed, right? Nothing has fundamentally changed. There's no reason to believe it will never happen again. In fact, we look around us and we see it happening again, right? We see it happening in China right now. We see it happening in Ethiopia right now, right? And we see the start of the collapse of our current set of institutions across the world, which has also meant that we see it right now in every single country as it refers to, in terms of COVID, but also in terms of social media, in terms of cancel culture. There is a dependency in the world, right? Our entire world is structured around creating dependency through debt, through universities, through schools, through COVID, through Facebook. We live in a culture that celebrates this kind of dependency. And I think, the only real alternative, the only future-looking, optimistic social innovation that we have, which doesn't try to look to the left or to the right or backwards, is Bitcoin and the philosophy that it represents. And I'm very curious to what extent, and to hear from you guys, to what extent you think this is, in one way or another, this message is resonating with the people that you talk to, and in particular, to what extent you think that people are being attracted to Bitcoin, like for example in the Black community in the United States. To what extent are people being attracted there to Bitcoin because they resonate with this idea of self-ownership and self-empowerment, rather than the culture of dependency that we live in?
I think it all, and my bad for you guys, I'm coming in like this is a little bit late, man. What's up, Zay? What's good, King? What's happening, Yago, man?
How you doing, Lamar?
Yeah, Yago, I got some beef with you a little bit, but I ain't gonna talk about it today. But I will say this though, I think it's access, man. It doesn't matter if somebody is, like against you. It don't matter if they're your enemy. Bitcoin is for everybody, right? And I think there's nobody that can stop anybody in the world from getting into Bitcoin, and that's the power of it. Like nobody in the world, there is nobody in the world can stop anybody else. The government can't stop you. Some organization can't stop you. People who don't like you because of the color of your skin, or people who don't like you because of your sexuality, or people who don't fool with you because you come from a certain country, they can't stop you from actually having access to Bitcoin. And I think that empowers people. And I think the financial system as it is now is about being in power over people and using that power to manipulate the monetary supply, much to the chagrin of the little people. And so for me, it's it's that whole like idea of access is very, 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 very powerful, especially when it comes to how do you save your time, you know?
Well, I just wanted to briefly touch on Yago's question where he was saying in the Black community, how is it being accepted or recepted? This is what I'll say is that, unfortunately, the media has done a good job of conflating Bitcoin and crypto as the same thing. And a lot of times in the crypto world, it's a lot more speculation, gambling, more of a casino. And I think with Bitcoin, people have to understand what money is, the characteristics of money. They have to understand, you know, Gresham's law, thermodynamics, physics, math, cryptography, a lot of subjects that a lot of people in every community are not, you know, relatable with and don't really understand. So the main thing that I'm seeing is with humans, human nature doesn't change and human greed is real. So people think that they can get rich first. But what ends up happening is a lot of the people that we teach in our community is that after all of the jumping from crypto to crypto, trying to do a bunch of trades, trying to figure out how to get rich quick, they always end up understanding that the security and the permissionless model of Bitcoin is a better form of money. And I think that even though the numbers say that Black people are twice as likely to adopt it, I would say that in my experience, we're half as likely to adopt Bitcoin because it either doesn't appreciate as much as we thought it would, or we don't, a lot of people in our community don't appreciate the innovation that Bitcoin was. They think it's just the first one, or it's the old crypto, when in reality, it took over 40 years to get to that point. And the elegance of design of Bitcoin, even though we try to explain it a lot, I think in the Black community, we still have a long way to go as far as getting people to understand the difference between Bitcoin and some of the larger communities. So, Yago, to answer your question concisely, we need more education. And that's why people like me, Lamar, King, we do what we do to educate people on the subject.
And to be honest, though, be honest, Zay, I think it's everybody needs more education. I think.
Oh, yeah,
like,
everybody.
Yeah, because the Black community ain't the only ones out here fooling around with these crap coins, man. Like, these baby coins are out here, and I think the narratives are getting spun for the people look at those over a Bitcoin, and people just not educated enough. And it's a very sad day to me that the people who are actually out here educating for Bitcoin are some of the ones that get attacked the most. It's crazy. It's like you're not helping out the cause if you have people actually putting the facts out here and putting truth out here, and you're attacking them as well. So I'm like, let us start to make sure that we highlight those people that are saying the right things, make sure we put them in a position to talk. And I appreciate Yago and Sovryn for giving me the opportunity to speak today. But we just got to keep doing that, man. We got to keep educating everyone, the Black community. The great thing about Zay and Bless and King Bless and myself, like, we're being intentional about taking it to the Black community, because I'm at this conference right now as probably, I don't know, 300-400 people here, and there's probably still only 5 Black people at this entire conference, or 6 Black people. And this is 2021. It's been around for a while. So it just lets you know, like, it's still a lot to go to make this thing more diverse, but at the same time, like, Bitcoin doesn't need diversity. Bitcoin is just a tool, but we need more people who are willing to take this message into the nooks and crannies that everybody else doesn't really focus on.
I'm curious, do you find that within the Black communities that you guys are part of, is it mostly men or women who are interested, not around crypto, but specifically around Bitcoin?
It's still probably a lot of men, but in the Black Bitcoin billionaires, man, it's a lot of women, a lot. And the crazy thing is that when we do like game shows or quizzes or try to see who knows the most about it, like the things that we're educating, the women always win. So shout out to the women out there, man, for holding it down. But there are some very knowledgeable women about Bitcoin and the space. And I think, it's a lot of men still. I think I'll let Zay and them talk from their perspective. But I think we get a lot of women in the Black Bitcoin billionaires. So I don't know what it is, as far as Zay and them and those guys go.
One thing I'll say is a couple things, Yago, because the answer you spoke about autonomy. And this, I guess, can tie back into Blacks and Bitcoin or cryptocurrency specifically. But again, part of my story is the autonomy of Bitcoin. So the autonomy that Bitcoin offers. Like, that is what I base a lot of my life on what's going to make me more autonomous in the future. So I would just say personally, that's how I got into it. And with that, I think sometimes in general, we may be conflating who has the most crypto or who has the biggest platforms. or even some of the conferences with the amount of blacks in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Now, of course, numbers in any community could always be higher, but I push back and say and our channel just isn't specific toward catered toward blacks. I think it's actually more white males that come on our channel than anything. So we have a large audience, but it's about 80 to 90% males. But in general, I think that from what I've seen just from traveling, talking to people, from actually going to meetups where local people are there, there's still a strong percentage of black people in this space. Now, when it comes again to conferences, I'm not sure where the numbers go there, or even where it's, well, who has the most Bitcoin? Then maybe that's where we can find improvement in the numbers. But as far as just representation, again, I think because people see Isaiah every day, myself, or Lamar all the time and all that, I'm like, well, okay, let's look at content creators in the space. Like, there's a percentage that are black, to be honest. So I don't know. I kind of push back against that because, and also even on Fox Soul, Black Channel, one of the hosts asked us about blacks in crypto, so, and that's a black host who asked. So I think it may just be people are getting the numbers skewed because they're not on the ground level, actually going out there talking and trading or investing, like literally on the ground floor talking to the community. Those are my thoughts.
I'd like to ask this maybe in a slightly controversial way, because I think it should. I mean, I think it's a sharp topic, but I've experienced the shanty towns of South Africa. I've been in various places where there are ghettos and oppressed communities, and when I was in the United States, some parts of Black America, like inner city areas that I experienced, Pittsburgh and Baltimore, they felt almost like they were under occupation, right? It felt like there was an external force, which was the police, which were basically an external occupation force. And one of the things that I wonder is, to what extent is there a sense that we need, within these communities, and I don't know if you guys, if you can speak to it, but to what extent is there a feeling, look, we need to rebel, right? And the way we're going to rebel is by creating our own institutions, is by, sticking it to the man. And to what extent is Bitcoin, as opposed to crypto, because crypto is like a get-rich-quick scheme, but Bitcoin really represents a protest, really represents a principled stand, a rebellion. To what extent are people connecting with that?
Oh, I would say a low level for sure. From what I'm originally from Detroit. I just was home not too long ago for holidays and stuff. It's a low level, but I would say that's the same whether you're in an inner city or urban environment where the demographic is mostly black, or whether you're near a trailer park where it's mostly white. In those areas, the situation, from what I've seen and experienced myself, is a survival thing. So it's not which protocol are we going to use or which technology are we going to use to get ahead of the man. They're not even, majority of people aren't even thinking of getting ahead of the man. They're thinking, how can I keep my lights on tonight? How can I feed my children tonight? So again, this is where the educational piece becomes so important, because that's where you teach people, yes, instead of going check to check, or instead of having to rely on a bank account that might give you a $30 whatever overcharge fee and charge you $8 for a savings account when you're not even making that back. Instead of using these mechanisms in your life now, you can use Bitcoin and these wallets and all these new mechanisms that are coming about. But I don't think it's an anti-Bitcoin thing. I think it's just an they don't know. There's a new technology, and a lot of people just don't know about it, in my perspective.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few words as well. And I unfortunately, I got to jump onto a Zoom conference in 5 minutes. So let me just say a few words, and then I'll have to go. So I think that one thing that a lot of folks are not aware of is that right now Bitcoin is under siege. So I talked a little bit about the infrastructure bill that got passed last year. So it's law, right? And the Treasury Department right now, as we speak, is in the midst of writing up the rules of how to enforce this. And if you don't do the proper reporting, which is pretty impossible to, even if you wanted to, you face 5 years of prison, right? Plus a hefty fine. And what I hope is that folks on this Twitter space and others will kind of become more aware of this pushback that's happening from our leaders in government, because next year when the infrastructure bill goes into effect, it's going to be super bad news to this whole industry. And so I think that's something that's really important to get involved. I think in the past, I think that can you guys hear me still?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Sorry. Yeah, my phone's glitching. Anyways, I think what we have to be aware of is the traditional finance industry in the United States takes up about 10 to 20% of the U.S. economy, right? That means of every $100 earned, right, they're taking about $10 to $20, right? You look at Visa, they take 3% of whatever is sold. And for doing what, right? If you look at what these financial companies are doing, they're literally just moving numbers on a spreadsheet. They're not creating. They're not risking capital per se. What they're doing is they're basically like another form of a tax. They're basically like a leech on our economy, and so I think Bitcoin offers this incredible opportunity to have increased financial efficiency, not having debased the currency. But what's happening is the antibodies, right? The traditional finance industry, the people who are taking 10 to 20% out of every dollar in the economy, they don't like this, right? They like the current system. They like how they get these outrageous margins. So like my Charles Schwab account, I get like a 0.2% interest rate on my savings, yet my credit card from them is like 25%. There's a 100x delta, right, spread. I mean, what other industry is there where you get such a large spread between what you get as an earner to what you get as a borrower, right? It's just absolutely crazy. And so unfortunately, the infrastructure bill wasn't the only one. There's a whole series of bills and executive orders coming down the pike right now, which is coming out to really try to destroy Bitcoin. Now, I personally think that Bitcoin is incredibly resilient. You look at China, they shut down Bitcoin mining with over 50% of the hash rate, and Bitcoin bounced right back, right? There was no one directing this. It was just the incentive system. And so I think Bitcoin is going to last. It's going to be around. I think it's going to be hard for any government. If China, the most authoritarian government in the world, couldn't shut it down, I think certainly the U.S. government is going to have a hard time shutting down. But what this does do is it makes it kind of drives us into the underground. And so what I want to encourage folks who are listening is that this year it's critically important to get involved politically. So if there are pro-crypto candidates in your area, support them, right? Retweet their tweets, follow them, whatever. Donate, volunteer for their campaign, or if you're inclined to, run for office as well. Because the problem is that the traditional establishment is not for Bitcoin. There was an attempt earlier this year for a group of only about 10 congresspeople to try to fix some of the issues in the infrastructure bill, and they're getting no traction. And the only way we're going to have a voice and be able to change this is if enough of the anti-crypto, anti-Bitcoin folks in Congress lose, right? They lose to pro-crypto candidates. So I just want to encourage you guys to do whatever you guys can to support the folks trying to challenge the establishment, the folks who want to shut down Bitcoin. Because I think this is one of the biggest problems. It's a revolution, as someone mentioned, right? It's in some ways, I believe, in some ways, Bitcoin could be its own nation state, right? It's supranational. It's a way that unites all of humanity together. And the promise of this is so huge. And I don't want our country to fumble it. And I certainly don't want us to drive it to the underground. So it's really important to step up this year, because if you don't step up this year, right, it's going to be super bad next year, right? All of us capriciously could be subject to 5 years of imprisonment for no good reason.
Hey, you guys, sorry about this. I gotta get out of here, get back on. I gotta get on stage really quick. But all I was going to say that's definitely right. I think definitely we got to get those politicians in that are pro-Bitcoin. But
I really
back to
appreciate the opportunity to speak. But thank you. Bye.
Sorry about that. But back to what King was saying about the community, I think education is right. I think we are on a sinking ship when it comes to our monetary policy and the dollars here in the United States. And I think most people don't even know it. And so I think we have to educate people that the ship is sinking, and then also help provide them a life raft. But I got to get out of here, man. Thank y'all for the opportunity. Thank y'all very much, and holla at y'all, man. See you on the flip side, Zay. See you, King. See you, Yago. All right, holla at y'all, man.
Thank you very much, Lamar and Greg, for joining us, and we hope to see you soon on our future spaces. Now, we'd like to get some questions from the audience, because as you see, our guests have a short time. So, Tio Wasita, you're going to be first. Prof J, you're going to be next. We also had Momo and Saber who requested to speak previously, but I don't see your hands right now. If you guys want to speak, just ask for it, and I will put you by the order. Go ahead, Tio.
Thank you so much. So much like y'all, I'm from the same mentality. Like, if you make it, you give back to your community, not just monetarily, but with knowledge. I want to approach the neighborhood that I grew up in that's 90% Latinx community, like at or below the poverty line. And I want to approach city council with some kind of plan to get my community to know about investing, especially crypto, so and Bitcoin, of course. But what resources do you guys suggest that I bring to City Hall?
Okay, so from my perspective, I would say the best thing is like a straightforward outline of resources as far as first, you need a game plan. Like, is your game plan to get small businesses involved? Is it to get on a more local level to have actual, local congressmen and women involved? You kind of have to identify what the goal is, that short-term goal, and then work it from there. Because what they don't want to see is a huge project, because some of them with their career goals, they might be like, hey, I'm going to be here another 8 months, another year, 6 months, whatever. So you definitely want to be working on their timeline. So I would suggest whatever the mini goal is, and again, if it's adoption within schools or communities, whatever, figuring out the people you want to target from there, and then have an outline of how you're actually going to deploy and execute it while within really a page if you can.
Yeah, and piggybacking on that, definitely have an outline, and within the outline, some of the specific things you can put in there is ways that they can actually benefit, because that is just a part of negotiation. They'll say, well, why would we do this? And some of the things specifically you can say is that in the Latinx community, we are very cash rich, and Bitcoin ATMs can allow local businesses to earn passive income just for housing them. So you can provide an on-ramp for them to get Bitcoin. You can also discuss how other politicians have taken the mantle either in Miami, New York, Austin, and a bunch of others. We just had Greg on run for Congress. Give them examples of other people in government who have already adopted this philosophy of using Bitcoin. And then you can also finish up with some of the aspects of the future as far as what we're building and how the dollar is going away. So those are some of the specifics that you can provide to them within an outline. But yeah, keep it concise, and definitely show them how they can benefit from it as well.
All right. Yeah, I hope that covers it. Professor J, want to go ahead and shoot your question, buddy? Professor J.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm glad, just glad to be here. There was a few questions I had, but it seemed like they were pretty much, talked about. So, yeah, I'm just glad to be here. But thank you for even having this space for us to talk and, share our thoughts. But thank you.
Thank you for joining us, buddy. 5, want to ask a question?
No, I just wanted to agree with and say thank you as well for having this and hosting. We appreciate that as a community. But getting politicians, pro-Bitcoin politicians in is major. I agree with that. That's all. Thank you. See y'all in Miami.
All right. See you in Miami, buddy. Okay. It appears that we don't have further questions right now. Yago, do you have any questions for Zay? Or Zay, guys, do you have any questions for Sovryn?
I'd actually be happy to answer any questions. But I do
I
see
see
that
we have
All
one.
right.
getting some.
Well,
Yeah.
Yago, I just wanted to ask you what. Well, I'll
Sure.
ask one thing. So how do you think, what do you think is the best method to introduce DeFi on Bitcoin to communities that may not be well versed on the tech, and how can Sovryn help?
Well, I think you know, Bitcoin has the huge advantage of being a get-free scheme dressed up as a get-rich-quick scheme, right? And I think the advantage of introducing and adding DeFi to Bitcoin is it allows people to start putting their Bitcoin to work and to be able to use it as a savings account, which can earn money and which they can draw down and get a line of credit off of. So I think it's by showing people, that they can lend their Bitcoin and earn interest, that they can use Bitcoin-backed stablecoins and then even use their Bitcoin to create Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, and that value of their Bitcoin can continue to rise. And so they can have, Sovryn will be introducing zero interest rate loans, so that you can borrow against your Bitcoin and pay it back at your convenience, or never pay it back and just, see the value of your Bitcoin continue to rise, so that you have more and more money that you can borrow over time. I think it's finding those use cases, which are obvious and interesting to people, that make, that allow us to move people into the space. And one of them is trading. People do like to trade. And, I don't think it's, and one of the reasons that Sovryn built out trading as one of the first things, including trading with leverage, is because we know that it attracts a lot of people to the space. It's a very, very powerful use case for a lot of people. And showing them that they can, they don't need to go out and buy all of these shitcoins. If they really want to increase their risk, they can do it with Bitcoin, right? I mean, the entire space is just basically a leveraged play on Bitcoin, right? What is alt season? Alt season is Bitcoin's going to go up, and we hope the alts will go up more. And then when there's a bear market, well, we know that the alts will go down more as well, right? So it's basically all a leveraged play. There's no reason that you need to make a leveraged play without understanding the risks. You can just make a leveraged play with Bitcoin itself. So to my mind, it's finding those use cases and using those use cases and explaining to people that everything that they want to do, including high-risk games, they can do with Bitcoin. And it's on the Sovryn community to make it so easy that it's easier to use DeFi and decentralized systems than it is to use centralized exchanges. And I think that's going to be easy enough because we don't have KYC, we don't have the gating, we don't make people give up their privacy, they can transact directly from their wallets. And so I think over time, Sovryn's going to become easier and more convenient than any of these other systems. That's the hope, at least.
For all of us, surely. We have another listener who wants to ask a question. Kino Rutherford, just unmute yourself and share.
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me. Just wanted to say what a treat this is for me to have the Gentleman of Crypto and Yago all in one program. Two of my a group of gentlemen that I love listening to. The Gentleman of Crypto. I'm a doctor here in LA. I'm a black doctor, and I am very involved in the community, in the black community, and children, and developing, empowering the black community. And if you guys are ever, I know King, I think you're out here. If you're ever interested in any sort of lecture or education, or just anybody to help with any of these programs, look me up on Twitter. I'm happy to volunteer. I miss you guys during the workday because I'm always at work, but I listen every night, and I'll get on there during the live chat and introduce myself at some point. Yago, I'm a huge fan. I went through the whole journey of crypto and altcoins, and I came back to Bitcoin, and then I discovered Sovryn, And I've just been a huge believer in what you guys are doing. I love the whole which I just love the way it's set up, and what the goals you have in mind, and I'm very aligned with your goals. I can't wait for the rest of the developments during process to be released. So this is just a real treat for me to hear all you guys in one place, and I really thank you for doing what you do, all of you, and I just wanted to reach out and say thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doc, and I'll definitely reach out to you as well in Los Angeles. We'll figure something out. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Kino. We have Saber here, who's been waiting from the start of this conversation. Go ahead, buddy.
Yes, hello. Thank you guys for hosting this space. Zay and King, watch you guys in the morning. I actually had a question to ask. What is your guys' best argument or persuasive point that you could give somebody who is maybe kind of understanding Bitcoin as what it's capable of doing, but also sees that they may not be able to afford a whole Bitcoin, and they understand that, hey, yeah, I can buy $5 or I can dollar cost average, what I can afford, which is only a minimal amount. What do you tell them to really get on board with it if their outlook is that, okay, what if I put in these $5? It's not enough. It's not enough to make a huge increase in value. What do you tell them? What do you tell them?
I'll just say the short end of it, because it's like Satoshi said, and everybody kind of gets to the point where you're in the space long enough. You don't want to, there's no need to argue anybody. It's literally, I was joking today. I was like, I'm not going to tell people to read the white paper anymore. I'm going to just tell them to read the abstract, because really just read the abstract, one paragraph, and you get it. So it's like either you get it or you don't get it. Another thing we're talking about, as long as the code remains as strong as it is, the Bitcoin blockchain remains as strong as it is, in literally 2 years, once we have the next halvening, the value will still increase because of scarcity. So literally nothing has to change in 2 years of a rise in value, because it's still proving at the very bare bone basics to be a store of value. So in 2 years when that happens, and then another 4 years after that, another halvening happens. And so in total 6 years, if you can count on the developers doing the job and us as persons who either operate nodes, who are actually in the industry, trying to self-regulate, or investors, whatever it is that you're doing in the industry, if you can count on the next 6 years, we'll move in a positive direction. Then again, the value will only go up. So you don't have to tell everyone, convince them. You just keep buying Bitcoin or dollar cost averaging. And for the people who are interested, you tell them how Bitcoin can affect their lives. Like, hey, do you have a business? You can accept it. You can do this. You show them how Bitcoin can offer them value. But at the end of the day, as long as you're buying it in 6 years, they should be able to just see you and look at your lifestyle and understand the power of Bitcoin.
Okay. Yeah, I see, and I understand. From that is just let Bitcoin prove itself, because I'm here trying to vouch for it. But I think in time it'll prove itself.
Saber, I would say this. I would tell him to get on the property ladder, right? What getting on the property ladder used to mean was that you would go and buy a starter house, a little apartment. But because you had that apartment, you start building equity, and then you had that, and so a few years later you could sell that and buy a bigger house, and that's how you get on the property ladder. Well, that was a trick for our parents' generation, right? For them, houses were the thing, and everyone knows the story of everyone knows a neighborhood in their city where people say to themselves, man, if this place was a dump 20 years ago, if I just bought the cheapest, most rundown thing 20 years ago, I'd be a millionaire today, right? Well, there are hundreds of millions of apartments and houses in the world. There's 21 million Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is the property of our generation. Our generation isn't buying houses. Our generation is buying Bitcoin. Every single generation has to make just one good choice, and they're set for life. Our grandparents' generation, it was get a college degree. Our parents' generation was buy a house. Doesn't even matter what kind of mortgage you take out. For our generation, it's buy Bitcoin. So I tell them, get on the property ladder. Buying sats is like buying a shitty apartment in the worst part of town. You can't afford a whole Bitcoin, but that's fine because that worst part of town is going to gentrify like a motherfucker because there's only 21 million Bitcoin and there are hundreds of millions of apartments.
I've never heard of the property ladder, but that's a really cool idea. Yeah, because Ken, you said it on the debate you guys had on Friday with the professor that you said, oh, these $3, in Bitcoin, it's still not going to go anywhere. Nothing's going to happen to that Bitcoin. And yeah, I think it's really cool. But like I said, I don't think enough time has elapsed in introducing Bitcoin to the people that I know to where they've seen like crazy gains to where they're motivated enough to get some because they don't have enough to make like a big purchase of it, even like, half a Bitcoin or something. So they can't see it increase in fiat terms, of course, which is, like I'm saying, I don't need to be convincing anybody if they can't see it, but, I do want to help people that I know that this technology would help. So that's why, I'm thankful for these spaces that you guys can share all this knowledge and, help everyone else see it through a different light. So thank you guys.
Thank you for joining us, Saber. And if you can just add on top of that, if someone only has $3 to invest, then I would assume that 100% rise in those $3 would mean a lot to him. So, each with his own level and what he has to offer. And as Yago said, just get on the ladder and start growing. That must be
one quick tidbit I want to add also is, and I got this one from Bitcoinzay and it works. Literally just start tipping it or for your friends and stuff. Like, and have them download a quick wallet in front of you, blockchain, whatever. Have them download a quick wallet and send them $3 to $5 worth of Bitcoin. Like, boom, now you're on some Bitcoin. And trust me, within months, years, whatever, when they look at that, they're going to be like, oh, my goodness, well, hell, what did you say about Bitcoin? And da-da-da. And then there it is.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, man.
Couldn't agree more. All right, we have Jassim Shahbaz. Want to ask a question?
Yeah, hey. Earlier, I don't know if it was Bitcoinzay or someone asked that what can Sovryn do to help or what are the solutions offered. I thought it should be the other way around. I think that Sovryn should be asking the Black community or the people who understand the problems in the Black community that how can they help, it should be more of a long-term collaboration between the people who understand Bitcoin and see what other options are available in DeFi and offer those or ask Sovryn, hey, we want this solution to be built on Bitcoin. I think that would be a more productive approach instead of just asking, hey, what does Sovryn offer? I don't know who it was, but I think that would be a better approach.
I love that question. I'm going to actually ask that question. What he said.
Well, the only thing I would say the Black community needs is equal opportunity. And with the tools that they've enabled on Sovryn, as well as other platforms, that's all we need. And education, which is what myself and King are doing, and Lamar and others, and Yago as well. So I think, that's it. Just equal opportunity. And we have that now.
I would say off the top of my head, I couldn't say anything directly. But what I will say is I'm happy to hear there are project founders out there like Sovryn, and you do have Yago who's saying, hey, I have my lines of communication. They're open. So moving forward, I do know we do spot an opportunity where it's like, hey, this whole community is having this type of issue, and we have a small business or a group or consortium of businesses coming to us trying to find a solution. We now know we can reach out to Yago perhaps and say, have they ever thought about DeFi, and this is the steps to take it. So I appreciate this type of dialogue to know that line of communication is open.
All right. Given that we don't have any further questions, of course, if anyone wants to speak, you may raise your hand. I think we're going to go to some final statements from our guests and wrap it night. Yago, would you like to start?
I think we're at the beginning of a new way of thinking about how we can construct our society around technologies which embody the principles that we want to adhere to. We've always relied on these more powerful people to try and make the world into, what they say should be our values, or we think should be our values. And particularly now, we live in a society which maybe has never been more. I don't know if there's ever been a society which has placed more dependence on large organizations. Everything from the government to large corporations to Facebook. Even our social communication and our friendships are mediated now by large organizations upon whom we are dependent. And I think Bitcoin really represents the only true form of justice which is blind, the only truly neutral set of rules which treats every individual as an equal individual, treats every individual equally, and does so using technology. And I think that's an extremely optimistic thing, that we've, as a species, managed to create this entirely new way of managing our affairs, which empowers us and which treats us all the same. So, putting everything else aside, I think we really haven't yet understood just how much of a leap forward Bitcoin and what it represents is for humanity as a whole. And one last thing I'll say, climbing the property ladder is climbing the sovereignty ladder. So start climbing the sovereignty ladder as well.
Every time you use fiat currency, you're funding oppression. And Bitcoin is an easy choice when you understand how good money works, hard money, and an asset that you can actually own and control. I think that the discussion here about this and the ability for a big tool for that is amazing going forward. The education that we're all, along with the work of everybody that's listening and others in the space, will be in the future. So for everybody listening, again, stay vigilant, make sure you get the right information, and of course, in my opinion, Bitcoin is the best tool of freedom, and if that's what you're looking for, make sure you stick with that long term, and we can start to change some of the things that we all want to see. I appreciate you, Sovryn, and Yago, for having us today.
All right. So thank you very much to our guests, King Bless, Isaiah Jackson, Greg Tanaka, Lamar Wilson, and of course our in-house Edan Yago. Thank you all very much for joining us, for helping us share this mission. We will continue to work on products and education to further help increase Bitcoin's adoption worldwide, to strengthen all communities, marginalized and non-marginalized as one. Thank you all for joining us, and stay sovereign.